Okay, great. I'm used to Zoom, so I always expect to get the sort of creepy robot voice that comes up when the meeting's being recorded. Teams is a bit more low-key. Okay. So we finished up before the break, kind of highlighting some things that you need to cover. So your services and product pricing, marketing plan, and your social impact, which includes talking about the need that your product's going to meet and thinking about the strategy and policy goals that you will help deliver through your project. So moving on now, another thing that your business plan needs to make clear, whether this is through a dedicated section, that's how I usually, or just throughout the document, you need to make clear that your organization has or can develop the capacity to make all of this happen. So you've maybe in your introduction touched on who are we? Are we a charity? Are we a community interest company? Who's involved? What have you done so far? That's probably been quite brief because you don't want to go into loads of detail on that in an introduction section before you get into the what are we going to actually do. So later on in the document, I tend to include a section that talks about organizational capacity and some things to consider here. Governance and management structure. I think you have had previous sessions covering this. And bear in mind that this may change over the 3 years that you're covering in your business plan. And it may need to change in order to deliver your project. For example, if you are set up as a charity and you are developing a new project that will involve a significant amount of trading income, you might need to think about, can we do this as a charity, or do we need a company set up as a subsidiary that can enable us to do that trading? So that might be a relevant consideration for some people. If you're an established organization and you're setting up something new, do you need to think about subgroups or committees that are going to lead on the new project? How is it going to be resourced? What staff and volunteer roles are needed? In your cash flow projection or your financial projection, you will have items, I think, for most of you for salaries or for fees from people who will be providing services to you. So your business plan might explain that in a bit of detail. Who is needed to deliver this project? Those of you who've done the business model canvas, I think this is usually bottom left-hand corner, internal resources. So you may have already thought all of this through. Something that can be quite useful in the run-up to doing a business plan would be to do a skills audit of your existing board staff, any key volunteers, etc., and find out how confident people feel about the areas of skill and experience needed to deliver this new project. If you have done one of those, you might want to highlight any key points. In this respect, your business plan should be showcasing your strengths, but as I think I mentioned at the beginning, if everything is sunshine and rainbows in this section and you don't mention any sort of development needs, I might start to sort of feel a bit suspicious reading this. So it can be good to acknowledge how your team would actually need to develop in order to deliver this new project, product, service that you're proposing. So would you need to go and gain a certificate? Would you need approval? Would you need planning permission? Would you need food hygiene certificates? What do you actually need to do still in order to deliver all of this? And is there a need for partnership working? Are you going to be delivering all of this on your own, or will you work in partnership with other organizations? Are there organizations that will refer people to your service or promote your service to their users? If so, this would be a good place to name them and talk about how those relationships are going to strengthen your project. How's all of this sounding?
I guess that can be like aspirational as well as agreed in principle or already working together when it comes to partnership working.
Yeah. So if you've kind of broken down things into stages or phases elsewhere in your business plan, then you could consider these are the organizations we're currently working with. We would hope by year 3 to also have relationships with others.
Cool.
Yeah, I think it's good to acknowledge that you may not have everything from day one. I
think the skills audit is really useful. I haven't considered that before, but actually it's probably really useful.
Well, there are various sort of generic templates. You might want to think about your new service and what you would need to improve. So maybe take a look at a template and then customize that a little bit. And you can use, if you use a survey tool, that can be quite good. Just send it around as an online Microsoft form or something like that. Give people the opportunity to do that anonymously. Yeah, that can be quite a useful sort of thing to inform this section if you're not sure what your development needs are.
That's useful, thanks.
Okay. Right. So something else that you might want to cover in this section, and that I think many of you will have already done, is your what's called a SWOT analysis. SWOT being strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is quite a commonly recognized framework for setting out key points about a project, and it can be a useful exercise. Is this something that you've done before?
Yeah.
Okay. Gordon, just because I don't see you nodding, have you done strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats from your projects?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
I think we might have touched on it through something else,
right.
But no.
Okay, so just to explain this for anyone who hasn't done it before, you would want to think about both internal and external factors. Internal factors might include your own staff team, your volunteers, your premises, your equipment, your systems. External might include anything else that's out there. And I've included a template in the presentation to think through the external factors in a bit more detail. This is an acronym, PESTLE. I think people rearrange those letters sometimes, but just to think about the full range of external factors that would influence your idea. You might want to think about political factors, new policies and strategies coming in, changes of government, will that affect you? Economic, how is the rising cost of living going to affect your idea, for example? Social factors, are people increasingly concerned about an issue? Technological factors, is online competition going to be increasingly relevant, for example? Legal factors, changes in legislation, and environmental factors. So that's just one sort of template that you can use to think about the external side of things. Kind of wanted to do an exercise on this, but I think we're going to run out of time. So since most people have covered SWOT analysis already, we'll probably skip that. But as a possible follow-up, something that can be quite useful, do the SWOT analysis, do the strengths, so internal factors that are positive, the weaknesses, the internal factors that are negative, the opportunities, the external things that are positive, and the threats, the external things that are negative. Do it for somebody else's project. And then swap and discuss. See if the other person spotted things that you weren't aware of. So something to consider in follow-up sessions. Okay, so following on from that SWOT analysis, that might have brought up certain risk factors that you would want to think about. Risk factors could come from both the weaknesses part of that SWOT analysis, so internal things that are could become risks, or it could come from the external side of things. So one thing your business plan will need to do is to convince your investors and other audiences that you have adequately thought about the risks and that you have measures in place to mitigate them. And again, that could be phased. There might be risks that you're not facing now, but would face if you do all of what you're planning to do. Are there future mitigations that need to be built in? So again, sorry.
I just want to check. So we're always risk adverse anyway. We always look at the worst case scenario before we take on a particular job. So are you saying then we look at the rest of the possible risk further down the line and then what we've got in place to mitigate that risk?
Yeah, or what you would need to put in place to mitigate that risk.
Okay.
I'll show you the template. This is also in my template document. There is a fairly basic template for a risk analysis here. And I've broken this down into phases by launch, year 1 and years 2 and 3. You might want to break things down slightly differently. So let's say a risk is that you don't have does one of you want to give me an example of a risk that you've thought about for your project?
Key member of staff leaves.
That's a really, really typical one. Okay. So key member of staff leaves. What would be the impact of that?
Delay on delivery.
Okay. Anything else?
Costs associated with recruiting, and impact on time, and loss of knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. How likely do you think that is to happen?
For me, probability as a percentage.
You can do this as a percentage. You can do this as I quite often just do it as a rating system, or you can do high, medium, low. I would say it doesn't really matter how you lay this out as long as you have a consistent system. Okay. What would you say? Just high, medium, or low?
Low to medium.
Okay. And why is that? What existing controls are there that make that a low to medium probability as opposed to a high probability?
I think probably, I guess they're sort of purpose driven. So, you know, it's not just a job, it's a job with a purpose, I guess.
Okay.
You know,
so your staff, care about the organization's mission.
Yeah, exactly. Feel aligned to the culture or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you might include things here like a good organizational culture, good staff satisfaction, which make it less likely that they would leave. Thinking about the impact that you mentioned, so some of the potential impact was loss of knowledge. Do you have controls in place against that?
Yeah, so it's codifying, I suppose, the work that they do. And I guess making sure that that information is passed on.
Yeah.
I guess it's effective contract. So there's a handover period, I guess. Yeah, I suppose it's potentially shadowing with another person, so the knowledge isn't left.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
thinking
someone
about
understands
succession
what's going
planning.
on.
Okay. As you go into this new trading project, so in introducing paid services, do you think that there are new mitigations required?
Yes, potentially, because you'll have contracts with external providers. So it's about contingencies around those, aren't there?
Yeah, so you might want to think about if you're having a contract with an external service provider, would you build in clauses about transfer of information and things like that? So that could be a potential future mitigation. And you would want to set out who will be responsible for that mitigation. So that might be you, or would it be the board, or who's the person in charge of making sure that all of that happens?
Yeah.
So that's a good example. Thanks, Kathy. Sorry for just picking on you because you made a suggestion. So for each of the risks that you identify, you can use this template to kind of work through them. There are other templates available. There are probably slightly more complex ones. Again, I've just kind of gone with something that I think would be fairly relevant to everybody. This is the kind of thing that it would be good to include as an appendix in your business plan if it isn't in the actual body of the plan. You may already have a risk analysis for your organization if you are well established, particularly if you're a charity. It's good practice for charities to maintain a risk register, but you will need to think about new risks that would be coming up as a result of what you propose to do. So what's in your risk analysis or your risk matrix should match up with the other content elsewhere in your business plan, and it should match up with your cash flow projection. So if any of those mitigations that you've mentioned incur additional costs, make sure that you've budgeted for those. You've included additional insurance or something like that. So you mentioned a really kind of universal risk, which is loss of a key staff or board member. Some other really general points to think about: not getting funding or investment could be a key one. Most projects will need a mix of different funding and investment from different sources. So there is a risk that even if you've already applied for a grant or a loan, that you won't get the additional funding needed to make it happen. So what would be the impact of that? What would be the probability? How would you mitigate it? This one's a bit more general, but I think mission drift. Some of you are talking about new services or new ways of operating. Is there a risk that would have an adverse effect on the established organization? And how would you control that? You are talking about growing and expanding. Are there risks in doing that too quickly? What do you need to do to control for that in terms of building relationships? Staffing, you mentioned staff leaving. If you're recruiting new staff, there can be risks involved in that as well, you know, the right people for the right projects. And I think something that's become hugely apparent in the last 3 or 4 years is that world events can have a massive impact on your project. So we've had 3 really disruptive events: COVID, Brexit, and the Ukraine war, driving increasing prices for fuel and a lot of basic goods. And it's really hard to anticipate stuff like that. I don't think any of us in January 2020 knew what was about to hit us. There's a phrase which unfortunately actually comes from a member of the George Bush administration, but I like it nevertheless, which is to think about the known unknowns, the things that you don't know about, and also the unknown unknowns, what's out there that you don't even have on your radar. So some really in-depth thinking needed for the risk analysis. Is there something that you just haven't even considered yet, like COVID in January of 2020? Thoughts?
I have no idea. I mean, I suppose for me, and I guess probably for everyone else, is AI and how that's going to affect everything that we do. And I'm sort of trying to keep abreast of it, but I mean, to me, that is proper known unknowns, isn't it? It's like,
totally.
We know that AI is going to have a massive impact, but what it is, you know, there's going to be plenty of positives, but plenty of negatives. And I don't know how you plan around it, but you're talking about it all happening very, very quickly.
Christian, have you seen any business plans written by ChatGPT yet?
Maybe I should ask ChatGPT to do the business plan.
Not seen anything yet.
It will offer.
There's things in the market out there that people are talking about, that creating their business plan and writing it for them. So I think it's coming.
Yeah, all you can really do for these things is kind of think about what you need to do in terms of scanning. Does somebody need to check in on this? Whose responsibility would it be to think about technological opportunities and risks?
Just to jump in, I think you just hit the nail on the head there as well. It's opportunities and risks. It's like, for us in our household anyway, our mantra is a crisis-opportunity. So
nice.
You know, it's like, and one of the known unknowns is that inevitably something unknown is going to happen, or there's going to be some sort of thing that knocks your plan or whatever sideways and stuff. So you know, if you can embrace it or gear yourself up to embrace it, then you always stand in a much better position than being sort of closed-minded to those sorts of things. So you know, again, it's easier said than done, but that's our mantra and our ethos.
Yeah.
I'm sure the Chinese symbol for crisis is like something and opportunity. That's what it actually symbolizes.
That's nice. Yeah, absolutely. As you're going through your risk analysis, it may be that some of the things are potential opportunities to build on, and you might want to look back. That's why the SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, format can be quite good, because it allows you to think about the different ways that these are linked. Going back to the very beginning, we talked about some of the things that you might want to do for market research, and one of them was speaking to comparators. One of the questions I like to ask if I'm doing this on behalf of a client that I'm working with is, what do you wish you knew when you started out? Just to, obviously, things change over time, but learn from what other people have, the challenges that other people have come up against.
I suppose
So,
we didn't realise there was people out there that are willing to help, especially
Yeah.
financially, you know, because at the start we were doing everything ourselves and we weren't looking for anything, and we didn't realise there was help out there.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Yeah, part of your mitigations might be making use of support that's available, Just Enterprise, for example. Even the training that you have access to through LaunchMe. That's, you know, one of the things that's going to help you to strengthen your plan.
But even this alone, even going through all these sessions, it's a great help.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can go into something and think you don't need any help. You've got it, it's all there, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not until you actually sit down and go through one of these sessions that you can actually identify your own personal gaps.
Yeah. And, oh, gosh, what happened there? Right when I was on the slide that said what could possibly go wrong. Yeah. So putting yourself in the mindset of a potential investor now, they will want to see that you've thought about the risks. And you mentioned getting support. I think they will want to see that you're accessing support. So if you are planning to make use of external support, then make that clear. One of the key things that you need to address, again, thinking from the investor's point of view, is the risk to them. If they invest in your idea, in your project, one of the main things that can go wrong is that you don't get sufficient additional funding. A lot of investors and funders will expect you to have a certain amount of your own capital or of match funding to reduce their own risk. So one thing that you need to make clear in the business plan for your social enterprise is that you have sufficient financial resources to make it happen initially. So key questions then are, how much will it cost to deliver what you've set out in the rest of the business plan? What are the expenses involved in getting it started? So things that you would need to budget for would include, it might include, for example, Kathy, in the case of the new service launching within your organization, marketing costs to reach this new audience of employers. It might include new software that you didn't need before to track how you're reaching those clients. Lorna, you mentioned the natural capital. You know, I'm sure there are new costs there in terms of keeping records and giving people a confidence that of how their money's been invested in safeguarding the environment. So if you don't already, have a think about the budget of startup costs that you're going to need. Is this something that you covered in the previous sessions? Something that you've thought about already? The picture can change a lot over time, particularly if there are capital costs, so buildings involved. Those are just subject to massive inflation at the moment. So every time you look back at them, the number goes up. But yeah, that's something to think about and something to revisit. And then the other part of this picture is where are you going to get that money? And you will probably need to set that out in your business plan in a table or as a list of the different funding sources that you will be using. And just, I mean, give me a quick list. I know you're all looking at social investment, but are there other sources that you have in mind beside that? Is anybody looking at crowdfunding, for example? All right. Other funding
looking at
sources
crowdfunding and a commercial partnership.
Okay.
So our own investment, crowdfunding, and a partnership should be 50. Well, it's looking about 50%, and then we're hopefully trying to get another 50% from a sort of whether it's government or NGO sort of funding, social funding.
Okay. Yeah. So you would just need to set out if it's crowdfunding and you haven't done that yet, what's the target? What are the target dates for that? And you might want to just briefly outline how you're going to do that. That might come back to, for example, your marketing plan, because that's a whole other strand to your marketing plan. You, in the pre-launch period, you're going to have to market this crowdfunder. So, we're almost at the end of the sort of structure that I set out, the map of your business plan that I set out. You have by this point set out your where you're going to get your funding to start up. It should be clear to investors also where your income is going to come from. I haven't included this as a separate section because we previously covered services and pricing. And you will have that very detailed cash flow projection with plenty of notes, I think, explaining all of the different assumptions that you've made. So when it comes to putting together your written business plan document, all you probably need to do is extract some key figures from that once you've got it, once you're happy with it, and kind of say, well, this is what our financial projections show, and have a look at those for more detail. I do think it's useful to do that, to extract some figures on your projected income and expenditure in the business plan, just to summarize, just because some people get on really well with spreadsheets. Some people don't. You would hope a social investor would get on well with spreadsheets, but your various audiences may not. So it can be quite good to highlight some key points in writing as well and cover all your bases. So you've done all of this. You've drafted your business plan. There are a couple of things still to do. And one of them is to go back and look at your financial projections and make sure that everything matches up. Chris and I had a discussion before we planned this session about kind of some of the things that we see in business plans. And one of the common issues is just the written content of the business plan and the financial projections not matching up. It might be that one person did one and one person did the other, and they haven't necessarily talked to each other. So really important to re-examine those. The services and pricing that you've set out in your business plan should match your figures in your cash flow projection. Your assumptions that you've made should match up to your market research. If market research is telling you people will pay up to £10 for a service, then don't put in £20 for the service unless you've got a really good reason why they're now going to be able to be willing to pay double. Have you included costings for all of the staff and any other resources involved in delivering your plan? Do you need a budget for any of the activities in your marketing plan or for your risk mitigation? And if social investment is going to be part of your funding strategy, have you got sufficient cash flow to meet the repayments? So all of these are good points to consider once you've got your draft of your business plan, more or less, how you'd like it. And then another thing to think about is, just before you finish, is summarizing. So the template that I have sent you, or will send you, includes an executive summary at the beginning. Thinking about different audiences for your business plan, particularly if you are aiming to put it out to your community, to potential crowdfunding investors who might be, you know, that they're somebody who's potentially going to pay £20 into a crowdfunder would probably be looking for some information on your idea, but they might not be reading the 40-page document that you put together in the same way that an investor who is putting in £500,000 would do. So do you need a summary, a short at-a-glance version? That could be just the first page of your business plan, or you might do that in another format. For crowdfunding, video can work really nicely. Could you do a little animation? Could you set it out in a canvas type diagram? Depending on who your audiences are, a short, snappy summary of your business plan can be really useful. In addition to this more detailed document that we've been talking about. And it usually makes sense to do that last, or at least to finalize it last. So once you've thought about everything at length, then how are you going to present that in a shorter format? Okay, so same question as at the beginning. My Teams window has now disappeared. Oh, well. Are you still seeing my presentation? My computer this was the IT issue. Luckily, it came along late in the session, but same question as earlier. Having talked through all of that, what are you feeling confident with? And is there anything that you think you'll need to think about in more detail? Anything you think will be more challenging? Has your answer changed from earlier on?
I think doing a business plan, I feel relatively confident, but I still feel at the end of it, and I'd like someone to have a quick look, you know, to see if I have missed something. You know, I think you can get so absorbed in it, but you need somebody a wee bit further away just to have a glance and say, this is what you missed, or I'm not understanding this. I got a bit of support from First Port regarding it, and I was surprised what I missed out on it. And I go, why did I think about that? You know, so maybe having somebody glancing over at a final stage, and so that's good to go. You know, I think that'd be valuable.
Absolutely. And we'll have the one-to-ones as follow-up from this session to do that. But I'd also encourage you to make use of the connections you've got from this program. Have a look at each other's. External reviews are always useful. Anybody else? Has your answer to that earlier question changed? Is there anything new that you're now thinking about doing?
I think for me, it's I'm just really busy. We've been very short staffed for a very long time, and I've just recruited someone to take a load of work off of my desk. So for me, it's actually about providing or looking at it as a project, I think. So I'm sort of programming, so I've got an endpoint with it. So I'm delivering against all the segments that you've helpfully put together. So I actually come up with a document at the end of it, but I think I kind of need to look at it as a project in and of itself, actually. So I think that'll be my piece of work to do, is how do I deliver the business plan over the summer where my work is slightly less busy, actually. So it's about providing that space, that headspace, I think, to
making space to do it. Okay, that sounds really good. And those of you who have larger teams involved in your project, you might want to involve various people in doing this. There may be somebody within your team who is really strong on the finance side of things, or who is a good writer and might be the best person to do that introduction. So identifying who will work on what is useful as well. Don't feel like one person needs to write all of it. If you do have various people contributing, just again pay real attention to consistency and that final check. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes left. I don't mind saying a few minutes after if people have a lot of questions. My last slide was just going to be my details, which I can put in the chat, but I think you will also get from Chris and Sinead. So yeah, any final questions or comments on that session, or about putting together your business plan in general?
This is maybe a bit of a how long's a piece of string question, and I know you referred to it in the beginning, but can you just clarify how many pages roughly you would expect a business plan to be?
Probably excluding appendixes, probably somewhere between 10 and 25.
Okay.
Do not take that as a hard and fast rule. There can be very good reasons why your business plan would be shorter or longer than that, depending on what content is in the document versus what is in an appendix, what are you linking to, and depending on how complex the idea that you're setting out is and how much additional information you need to set out. But that's just kind of a range of, if I got a business plan and it's 150 pages long, I might start to think, well, wait a minute, what are they needing to explain here? And when am I going to find the time to read this, which your investors will also be thinking about.
Mm-hmm. And see, in terms of the problem solution of like what we are creating for, as a enterprise, I guess that will weave into like your market research, but also the social impact section.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you're doing like a pitch or a pitch deck, it's quite, it's quite clear. Like this is the slide for the problem in terms of like as a whole, and then the part of it you're trying to solve. So I'm used to dealing with that in the introduction.
Yeah.
And in the introductory part, I guess that's where the aims of the organ, like, because I'm just referring back to the points that you said.
Yeah, so I hadn't included a detailed description of the need that you're trying to meet in the outline for the introduction section, but you could put it in there. I probably wouldn't go into loads of detail on proving that this is true and here are statistics and here's previous research. But yes, you could absolutely include an introductory sentence saying parents need support with A, B, C, and D. That's the need.
Okay.
Yeah. Nothing about this is absolutely set in stone. You may need to customize the template a bit to what you are doing and what you're comfortable with. I think treat it as a checklist. If you've covered all the points, then that's good. If you've done them in a different order or combined things differently, that's fine as well. Hal, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks for your time. And you mentioned some templates. Was that the ones that we saw of like the sort of SWOT analysis and PESTLE and stuff, or did you say you had a template of?
Yeah, so I think Chris and Sinead are going to send a Word document around next week.
Brilliant.
And it kind of matches up with the order that we went through in the slides, but has a bit more sort of detail than we managed to go through in the session.
Perfect. And then you mentioned that one of the biggest failures that you see, or one of the most frustrating things you see in a business plan is the sort of content not matching up with the figures in some of the spreadsheets. But is there anything else where people, which is a classic mistake that people make, or don't have, or it's just something that's missing that gives it, that sort of really polished edge? Or
good question. I think it tends to be quite obvious if you read quite a lot of these documents, if people have sort of copied and pasted a lot from other documents. There's nothing wrong with doing that. If you've got internal documents that already cover what you're trying to do, that's fine, but make sure that you sort of read through that again. Think about the relevance to the business plan. Think about, have you used consistent language throughout it? You know, are you using the same name or acronym for your organization? And that kind of shows that you've not just cobbled this together, copy and pasting, that you know, this is something that you've seriously thought about. It's just a kind of presentation point, but I think that can be something that is easy to miss.
Can I just jump in on that
Chris,
point?
I was going to say, see if you had any other observations there.
Quite a few times, there's two things, repetition and filler. So quite often I've worked on or seen business plans that there's just a lot of filler in there that's not relevant, and it's just about beefing out a business plan. It's not needed. Be succinct, be really clear, be concise, and if it's 5 pages and you get your point across, bingo, you've nailed it. Don't take 20 pages to say what you can say in 5. So that's the first thing I'd say. And repetition is sometimes something that can trip you up really easily. You don't always notice it in a plan, but you can say the same thing 3, 4, 5 times and you don't need to. So again, it's that checking it yourself, but get your peers to have a look, get others to check and challenge, and get them to be really honest with their feedback. If they're seeing something you've said 5 times, you can trim it, you can take bits out. So there are 2 bits that I've seen, and I think Judith's absolutely spot on about that. Consistency across all of the documents that you've got, whether it's your marketing plan, your financial projections, and your business plan, they all have to talk to each other. And the easiest thing to do is have it all spot on, make one change after the fact, but forget to do the change throughout all the linked documents. So it's just having that in your mind, I think, when you're creating all of this, making sure they all link up. I'd say these are the key areas to think about.
All right. Anything else? All right. Well, we're at 12 o'clock. I'm amazed that I actually stuck to the timings and didn't have to be told to wrap it up. So thanks very much, everyone.